Once upon a time, the type of car represented by these two right here was the last word in fashionable upmarket family motoring. In the 90s and 2000s, sporty saloons with posh badges simply flew out of dealer forecourts and car showrooms. Now though, not so much. The likes of the BMW 3 Series, Mercedes C-Class and Audi A4 aren't anywhere near as high up as the sales chart as they used to be. In fact, it's the SUV that holds the car park kudos. And that's a shame because these cars are great to look at, great to drive, and are often cheaper to run than a tall, heavy SUV. And that is mainly because of physics. So, are sporty saloons a dying breed? Maybe. Well then, it could be the time to grab one while you still can. And these two are probably the most driver-focused of them all. We've got the Alfa Romeo Giulia and a BMW 3 Series. And if you do want to grab these particular ones, you'll be needing to spend just under £27,000 or £370 a month on this lowish spec 2-year-old BMW 320 M Sport, or a whisker under £350 a month or £20,500 for this 3-year-old Alfa Romeo Giulia Sprint. You'll notice that there's not much difference in the monthly payments, which makes the Alfa comparatively expensive on finance, but a bit of a bargain if you happen to be paying cash. I know what you're thinking, why the comparatively high monthly cost? Well, that's because Alfa Romeo Giulias don't hold their value quite as well as BMW 3 Series. So if you want that rarity and Italian style and you want to finance it, it will cost you a little bit more. But then again, if you're a cash buyer, maybe it's a bit of a bargain. And I don't know about you, but there is more than a hint of 3 Series in the Alfa's styling. And that's no mistake because Alfa Romeo is definitely targeting 3 Series customers. So, which is best, the German 3 Series or the Italian 3 Series? Let's find out. In some ways, the interior of the Alfa Romeo reminds us of what BMW cabins used to look like. We're thinking BMWs from the 90s and the 2000s. I mean, if you squint a bit, I feel like I'm in an E36 maybe. I mean, actually no, there's a USB port, come back to modern times. Really though, this driver-focused dashboard layout is quite BMW-esque. Then we've got this joystick-style gear selector, which again, until about 5 years ago, was a signature BMW feature. And if you weren't already clear enough about who Alfa had in mind as the rival for the Giulia, then the infotainment system is controlled by a combination of this rotary controller and is also touchscreen. It's not quite as slick as the BMW system, but it's not bad. This is the middle version, we're going to say, because older versions of the Giulia just had the rotary controller and no touchscreen, and then the version after this one had a much slicker touchscreen operation. It's not all manically Germanic in here, mind you. These seats hug you in a very Italian way. The rib leather is far more Milan than Munich, and the cowled instrument dials are pure classic Alfa. Unfortunately, the other key difference between the interiors of the Alfa and the BMW is fit and finish. Okay, so Alfa Romeo designers may well have targeted BMW when it comes to style and layout, but when it comes to fit and finish, you have to wonder whether they actually sat in a BMW because it's not exactly giving off premium vibes in here. In fact, it doesn't really feel any more posh than a Peugeot, and that's probably more of a compliment to Peugeot than an insult to Alfa Romeo because it's not bad, but it just doesn't scream classy in the same way as a BMW cabin. It just feels reassuringly solid in here, as you can probably tell from the smile on my face. It is maybe not quite as classy, premium and solid as an Audi A4, but definitely more so than a Mercedes or a Volvo or an Alfa Romeo for that matter. Having said that, while Alfa sticks faithfully to the rules of classic BMW interior design, this BMW does not. Sure, we've got this driver display screen going into the infotainment screen, kind of curving towards the driver slightly. Other than that though, it's fairly minimalist in here, which is fairly un-BMW. For example, some of the controls need to be accessed from the central screen here, so while you should be concentrating on driving, you're actually taking prods at the screen. Mind you, maybe we should be thankful for small mercies, because this facelifted version of the 3 Series has done away with the gesture controls, which sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. One element we're glad BMW has held on to is the iDrive rotary controller, which the brand pioneered and which is much more effective and intuitive than the similar setup in the Giulia. So it's even more of a shame that BMW is likely to be phasing out even this in future models. As for other aspects of life here in the BMW, I've got a similar amount of lateral support in these supportive sporty seats as there is in the Alfa Romeo, although they are a little more flexible, which suggests that they might cope better with someone of a larger frame. That's not me then. In the back of the BMW, meanwhile, we've got our own climate control buttons and good cup holders and charging points here for your devices. And the seats split in a three-way split, meaning that you can carry skis, or perhaps 2 long brooms, or a shelf maybe. Anything really, really long. And fans of transporting brooms and long shelves can rejoice, because the Alfa offers a similarly flexible seating arrangement. And you might be wondering, who transports brooms? Well, I did 2 weeks ago, and I didn't have a ski hatch. What else can we say about this vehicle? Well, there are no climate control buttons, but there are your own vents. There is a USB charger just down there. And there are cup holders, which are good, but not as good. In fact, overall, it's just not quite as good in the back and not quite as roomy, although there is more space back here than you'll find in a Mercedes C-Class or Volvo S60. As for boot space, they both offer about 480 litres of space, but look at that opening, and then why did we park them so far apart? And this one, a much more useful aperture. Now, what we really want to know is how they drive. Which one first? Alfa. It's clear from the styling and the interior that Alfa Romeo is targeting a BMW-like feel with the Giulia. But does that translate to the driving experience? In a word, yes, it does, because the responses are keen, immediate and eager, yet it doesn't translate into a firm ride. This is a wonderfully balanced car that has that rare ability to flow down the road. In fact, it's a bit more lively than a 3 Series. It almost feels like a 3 Series from the 90s. You can spec it with adaptive suspension, but honestly, we don't think it needs it. It is a bit of a shame then that there's no throaty V6 under the bonnet, unless you are fortunate enough to be able to afford the gorgeous high-performance Quadrifoglio version. In fact, the 2-litre turbo petrol in this car actually feels a bit flat, even though strictly speaking the numbers suggest it's a little stronger than the BMW 320i, with 201 horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of 6.6 seconds. No, the engine you really want, aside from the V6, is the more gutsy 280 horsepower, which really turns this car's punching power right up. Either way, claimed fuel economy is about 38 miles per gallon. Yes, as if we're going to get that. Even with less power than we would ideally like, this car is a joy to drive, especially flicking through these tactile metal paddles. Switching over to the 3 Series and you immediately sense a car that is a little less lively than the Giulia and a little less vigorous. The steering is heavier and not as hyper-reactive, and the overall driving experience is just a bit more hefty. And that's not just because the 320i is slightly down on power, with 184 brake horsepower and 0 to 60 coming in at 7.4 seconds. No, the key difference is that the BMW is designed, you sense, to be slightly more sure-footed and stable, which is different to the bubbly Alfa Romeo, but just as satisfying in its own way, as it means you get the feeling you can lean on the BMW a touch more confidently than you can in the Alfa. As with the Alfa, adaptive suspension is available on some models, but the 3 Series is at its best with this suspension, which is non-adjustable but sporty M-Sport suspension. But it's definitely much more firm and fidgety than the lithe Alfa Romeo. Which one you prefer is down to personal choice. There's not much to separate them when it comes to fuel economy either, though the 320's official figure of 40.4 miles per gallon is a tad better than the Alfa Romeo's, and you're likely to get a bit more out there in the real world too. Here's the good news. If you want a traditional sporty saloon that's great to drive, well priced and not overly flashy, both of these cars fit that bill. Question is, which one should you go for? It is quite difficult to choose between them. Well, some people might find it difficult. Anyway, we shall pray see. The Alfa Romeo is arguably more elegant, although the BMW has a little bit more of an assertive road presence. The Alfa Romeo has a sharper turn-in and offers a better ride, yet the BMW feels more stable and more polished, and ultimately will be more satisfying to live with on a day-to-day basis.